The accommodation they offered was upon terms which we thought destructive to our testimony, to lay aside all debate and let bygones pass and go on in the public work, which we did not think was the way to heal our sore. But we offered, if differences and exceptions could be removed in a right and honest way, we would be most willing to join with them. Which exceptions were given in these particulars following, that is, quote, their leaving the country and deserting the public work when it was so necessary to concur in the testimony in a time of so great a famine of the gospel, and not only concurring in the testimony, but condemning it in Sanjuar and Lanark declarations, even as to the matter of them, and not condemning the paying of the locality imposed for maintaining soldiers against the work and people of God, there countenancing the compliers of the time while in that land, and when abroad joining with the Scots congregation at Rotterdam, and hearing the indulged preach there, they are informing against us and dispersing us with slanders, such as these in the forementioned information, and their concurring in the Earl of Argyll's association, against which we had so many things to object, as above hinted. Unquote. Which exceptions, though among the least, we have against many other ministers, with whom we have no clearness to join in our now circumstances, yet as we thought sufficient to demur upon, when, after many fruitless janglings, we could receive no satisfaction about them, nor a public testimony satisfyingly stated, wherein we might both agree and concur, albeit we made an overture in the end, that they and we should endeavor it in this sort, quote, that they severally by themselves should draw up all the sins of the time, and we by ourselves, that so, when compared together, it might be seen where we differed, and how far we could unite. Unquote. But though they seemed to be as much for it as we at first, yet in the end, when it was offered, they rejected it. So the conference broke up. And thereafter we were more untenderly dealt with by them, and also deserted by several joined with us in fellowship, who from that time began to leave off coming in our general meetings, and to keep separate ways, without respect to our former consented to agreement, and also did hear, receive, and spread some false reports given forth against us, without premonishing us about the same, and drew many off from our societies by such means, with some of which we had a conference, January 28th, 1686, who said, quote, they had a verbal commission from some societies in Carrick, unquote, etc., the effect whereof, whatever was the intent of their coming, tended to a further breach, though we were not conscious to ourselves of any untender dealing with them. For first, we endeavored to remove all supposed grounds upon which they might stumble into alienation from us, by clearing our minds about all these things the ministers laid to our charge. Then several questions of weight about our present differences were proponed to the meeting, that is, quote, about a letter of accusation spread against us, which they did not positively disclaim, about the Earl of Argyll's declaration, which they would own or disown, according as it was diversely interpreted, quote, about the exceptions given in against the ministers, which they alleged were not valid, and finally, we asked the foresaid persons, quote, whether or not they were clear to join with us in general and particular fellowships now, when they had heard us speak our minds so freely, unquote. This they refused to answer, putting the question back whether or not we would join with them. And generally, in all the questions, they declined freedom and plainness, and seemed averse from satisfying us, and to be rather for contending than a free communing for union. Chiefly, they stickled about a general conclusion previously agreed to and resolved upon among us, quote, that nothing relative to the public and concerning the whole should be done, without the consent, or at least the knowledge of the whole, unquote. Which conclusion, though formerly they agreed to, yet now they are called an imposition, alleging that thereby they might not hear a faithful minister when occasion offered. Though we told them we did not take that conclusion in an absolute sense, but exponed it, as it is after qualified, with the several cautions mentioned, head first, section 3. In fine, for the result of this conference, when we were urged as above whether we would join with them as formerly, by way of retortion to our proposal of the same to them, we told them we could not answer in name of our societies, having no direction from them for that effect, and that, for our own part, we would not refuse accidental or occasional communion with them, as brethren and Christians, but in the present circumstances we could not be clear to concur with them as formerly in carrying on the public work, until our exceptions were removed. which were their breaking that conclusion of brotherhood formerly condescended to, in their calling ministers against whom we had exceptions unremoved, without acquainting us therewith, in their drawing together in arms without our knowledge and contrary to what was concluded by themselves with our friends, and their siding with other persons in point of disagreement against us, whereupon they broke away abruptly, and their carriage since hath been very discouraging, by their laboring many ways to represent us unto the world as odious in their informations given in to ministers against us. But now we must bear many obloquies from them and others, waiting in dependence on the Lord's vindication, who will, quote, bring forth our righteousness, or the righteousness of his cause, by us maintained, quote, as the light, and our judgment as the noonday in his own time, unquote. But shunning to be prolix, and studying all brevity possible, we shall here desist from such a sad and lamentable relation, wherein we have but touched some of the many steps of our defection, and our poor and insignificant contendings against the same. The declaration of the present state of our testimony. The former deduction we have premised, that the state of our present controversies may be the more fully and clearly represented, and that what follows may be the better understood, having discovered how our defections and breaches began, and how they have multiplied and increased, and how, notwithstanding, the Lord hath never wanted a company of living witnesses to bear testimony against the same. But seeing as hath been the lot of the more faithful in all ages of the church, so in our day those whom the Lord hath honored and helped to witness for him against the crooked ways of the generation have had it for their trial to be much suspected, reproached, contradicted, censured, and opposed by many of the lukewarm, back-drawing, and indifferent tempters, and we have not wanted our share by reason of the dreadful imputations of persecutors, and the misrepresentations of pretended friends, whereby many of Zion's well-wishers have been nonplussed, what to think of us and our cause. Therefore, for the glory of God, the vindication of truth, the satisfaction of puzzled consciences, clearing of differences, wiping off reproaches, removing of mistakes upon our part, reclaiming such as through ignorance, misinformation, or misconceiving apprehensions have heretofore mistaken, at least have become jealous of our principles and practices, for convincing of these, if the Lord will, who mostly oppose us for maintaining, according to our power and places, the covenanted work of reformation, and that the young generation may not be stumbled, who are greatly in hazard thereof, by the turnings aside that have been to the right and left hand. And finally, that all the Christian reformed world, who will impartially weigh matters in the balance of the sanctuary, without affection or prejudice, may see with their own eyes, and attain unto a better understanding concerning us. Upon these and the like grave and important considerations we, for ourselves, and all who adhere unto us, in the stated testimony against popery, prelacy, Erastianism, sectarianism, schism, or defection, find ourselves obliged to give an account of our principles to the world, and then proceed to offer a brief reply to the material accusations which are given forth against us in letters, informations, and conferences. We shall now, therefore, in the first place, give a short declaration of our testimony, showing first what we maintain and positively own as the matter of it, and secondly, what we disown as prejudicial thereunto and inconsistent therewith. As to the first, we sincerely, unanimously, and constantly testify and declare our hearty embracing of, and adherence unto, the written word of God, contained in the Scriptures of the Old and New Testament, as the only rule of faith and manners, and whatsoever is founded thereupon, and consonant thereunto, such as the confession of faith, our catechisms, larger and shorter, our covenants, national and solemn league, the acknowledgment of sins and engagement to duties, the causes of God's wrath, the ordinary and perpetual offices of the church by Christ's own appointment, such as pastors, doctors, elders, and deacons, and the form of church government, which is commonly called presbyterial, either in congregational, presbyterial, or synodical assemblies, whether provincial, national, or ecumenical, together with all the acts and proceedings of our general assemblies, especially from the year 1638 to 1649 inclusive, yea, and every piece of the attained unto Reformation of the Church of Scotland. In like manner we testify and declare our cordial adherence unto all the faithful contendings that have been owned and prosecuted by ministers or professors for promoting and defense of Reformation in former times, as these, against the public resolutions, Cromwell's usurpation, the vast toleration of heresies and sects in his time, as also to all the faithful contendings of ministers and professors since the unhappy restoration of Charles II, when the work of Reformation was overturned, unto this very day, whether against the sacrilegious usurpation and tyranny of the malignant party, or against the compliances, defections, and unfaithfulness of ministers and professors, more particularly unto all faithful protestations, testimonies, and declarations that have been given in these latter times, for the work of Reformation, and against all usurpations of and encroachments upon the prerogatives of Christ's crown and privileges of his house, and anything else of whatsoever sort, prejudicial to the Reformation, and expressly we declare our adherence unto the declarations published at Rutherglen, Saint-Ouen, first and last, and at Lanark, together with the apologetical declaration affixed upon some market crosses and several parish church doors, for the matter, substance, and scope of them, as accommodated to the times wherein they were exhibited, according as we explain them afterward. Head 2. Finally, we testify and declare our cordial owning and approving of the faithful and free preaching of the gospel in the open fields, as well as in houses both before and since Bothwell, and of the duty of defending the gospel and ourselves by arms, and the lawfulness of defensive war against the usurpers of our ecclesiastical and civil liberties. And consequently, all these appearances in a martial manner against the public enemies of this church and kingdom, at Pentland, Drumclog, Bothwell, and Erasmus, and also our adherence unto the testimony given by martyrdom on fields, scaffolds, and seas, and otherwise by banishment, imprisonment, stigmatizings, tortures, or suffering any other ways, for their adherence unto the Reformation and non-compliance with the God-provoking courses of the time, and for not owning the authority, or rather tyranny, of usurpers, in place of magistracy qualified according to the Word of God. As to the second, we sincerely, unanimously, and constantly testify and declare our rejecting of whatever is contradictory or contrary unto the written Word of God, or not founded thereupon, either expressly or by direct, near, or necessary consequence, and more particularly, in like manner, we testify and declare our rejecting and disowning of Popery, Quakerism, Libertinism, Antinomianism, Socinianism, and all other heresies, under whatsoever designation, together with the blasphemies, heresies, and wild extravagancies of John Gibb, all errors upon the right hand, such as Anabaptism, Independency, Millenarianism, and all other sects and schisms, together with the divisive courses followed by any others, especially in our day, and the usurping of any upon the ministerial function, not duly called thereunto, as upon this ground, beside other reasons we had accepted against Mr. John Flint, and all errors upon the left hand, as prelacy and Erastianism, against which our church hath had much wrestling and contending, together with all kinds of idolatry, superstition, and profaneness, and whatever else is found contrary to sound doctrine and the power of godliness. Moreover, considering what heinous and God-provoking sins have been committed in this land against God, in contempt of and with prejudice to his cause and covenants, since we began to turn away from him, we shall briefly enumerate some of these, declaring our detestation and abhorrence of the same. Therefore, in the first place, we declare our testimony against all compliances with the iniquities of this time, established by law, in obedience to their cursed commandments, directly or indirectly, all countenancing of and complying with prelacy, supremacy, or tyranny, or any usurpation on church or state made by this malignant enemy, all hearing of curates or indulged, or paying either of them stipends exacted by iniquitous law, setting them up, all answering to the courts of persecutors, taking any of their oaths as the declaration, renouncing the covenants, the oaths of supremacy, and allegiance, the test, the oath of abjuration, the oath super inquirendus, and all others of the like nature, particularly the late new contrived oath of allegiance, substitute in the place of all the former, and comprehending in its bosom the extract of all their iniquities, requiring the acknowledgment and maintenance of the most open-faced and declared absolute tyranny of the Duke of York, in his invading the sovereignty of the Most High, and all his subservient popish and atheistical designs, which is contained in the late proclamation for the abominable toleration. Likewise all subscribing any of their bonds imposed to fetter and defile the conscience as the bond of peace, bond of regulation, the bond of comparence, and all others partaking of affinity with these.